communicate with others in a limited way by how we stand, walk, or gesture. Sign language is a skill that allows people who are deaf to communicate with other equally skilled folks in much the same way as we speak and hear. Hello, I'm Mike Goupel, and today we are pleased to have with us Mala Poe, President of the Board of Directors of the San Diego County Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. And with her is Johnny Young, a deaf man who is also a member of the Board of Directors. Mala, Johnny, welcome to PACE TV, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
My first question, Mala, is to you. Tell us, what is SDCRD, and how does it work? How long has it been around?
SDCRID has been around since established in 1996. And how it works is that we're a group of professional interpreters. We have about 230 members, 230. And we provide professional development for people who are in the field.
Uh-huh. And you're a nonprofit?
Nonprofit.
Uh-huh. And you have a mission statement?
Yes.
And we'll show that up on our screen.
Okay.
Now, why is there a need, Johnny, why is there a need for this organization?
It provides a standard and helps professional interpreters be professional for deaf people. There are many equivalent answers, but that's a good answer.
Okay. Now, your organization is part of a national organization?
Yes. RID, Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, in New York, Virginia. In Virginia, I was confusing it with NAD, National Association of the Deaf. Mm-hmm. In Virginia, they have about 50 affiliate chapters around the United States.
So that provides the services to as many people as possible throughout the country.
For, yes, coordinating shared services for interpreters and interpreting students, yes. We have some deaf people who are involved, some deaf interpreters who specialize in sign language interpreting. Mm-hmm. But yes, we do provide that service.
It certainly is a critical service, I would say.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's how you're speaking to me right now, right?
Absolutely. Now tell me, what is American Sign Language? I've heard that term.
Well, it's a language most used by American deaf people. It's complex, it has grammar, it is a proven bona fide language equivalent to French, Spanish, or other languages. But it uses the hands, obviously, and it uses facial grammar too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's said that a person is bilingual, a deaf person is bilingual. What are we really saying?
Often, when a person can read and write in English and use American Sign Language, perhaps is native or mostly native, or a person who develops a language and strong use of it. We also have trilingual people. People from other countries have their home language, or Spanish, a trilingual. That's what it means, is that they read and write in one language and can communicate in another.
Okay. Now, as a member of the deaf community, what classifies a person as deaf or hearing impaired or hard of hearing? How is that differentiated? How does that make the difference?
The medical term, hearing loss, hearing impairment, significant loss, profoundly deaf, it's usually people looking at the ear as part of the problem. Hearing loss and those types of things are medical, but a person who is involved in the deaf community or deaf culture, it's a cultural identity. We use the big D deaf, meaning a person who signs, who's involved in the community, whether it be interpreting, advocating, empowering deaf people, using sign language culturally. I have many deaf friends who have a hearing loss or who are hard of hearing who refer to themselves as deaf and are members of the deaf community.
Are your parents or any of your siblings also deaf?
My family is hearing, all of them. I have a couple grandparents, but through many years of using farm equipment, I think they are deaf, but only for that purpose. So I'm the only culturally deaf person.
Were you born deaf, Johnny, or as a result of an illness?
I was born hearing, and about 20 months I got spinal meningitis.
Now, that must have presented some challenges for your parents.
Oh, yes. Yes, of course. The challenge, well, me as their child and being deaf is a whole new world for them because they see a potential handicap, frustrations, challenges with the world that they were unaware of, what to do with a deaf child. And then politically, to teach me sign language or to teach me oral methods or to put me in Russia. I don't know what they would do. So there's a lot of challenges. But with all love and support and learning experience and patience, here I am today. A wonderful man.
And modest as well, I might say.
Yes.
But
Well.
you're very fortunate to have those two key words in your life, love and support.
Yes.
Very lucky. And I presume you had the equal amount of love and support from your siblings.
Oh, yes, I do.
Good, good.
That is another thing that's great about my family. Growing up, my brother and I were 20 months apart, so we both learned English and sign at the same time. So the whole house used baby talk, if you will, with English and sign language. So now looking back, I do thank my brother. I'm very lucky. He was a good sounding board with my parents and with me because we grew up together using sign language.
Wow, how nice for you. And he's a good man as well, obviously.
Yes, great guy.
Now, any adjustments that you had to make as a kid growing up in school, how did that work for you?
Well, becoming deaf young, I did, a lot of the things that I think were put upon my parents more than me, looking at language philosophy, what to do with me at school, teaching approaches, philosophies and such. But I think perhaps you mean more as I adjusted as a youngster. There's a few things that I did. A TTY, a teletypewriter for the phone to communicate and call a person who hears. The TV has captioning now where I can see what people are saying on the TV. There's a couple of things, but being deaf is not a big barrier to life in our world as we know it, I don't think.
Well, that's coming from someone who is obviously well adjusted. Most of us feel that we don't know how we would deal with it because we haven't lived through it. So it's a big deal for someone who has those faculties, And it's great that you're doing so well and you really accustomed yourself. So what kind of support was available to you then as a youngster? I mean, as far, not so much as what was available to you in the home, but as far as the community.
Well, obviously, core values is a big part of love, patience, trust. That's obvious. That aside, RID, certified interpreters, teachers for the deaf, deaf community. There are a lot of things that show me that I'm not alone and show anyone who is deaf that they're not alone. We have enough people who recognize a community, and that's a big support. Yes, we have technological advances and supports, but as far as peers are concerned, we have other people who are the same as I am, and that's the biggest support, is to meet another person like you. And more than one person is great. Not just the two of us, and when you have like 50, 100, and thousands, then it's really good.
Now, have things changed from the time that you were maybe in your early teens to how you are today as far as the support available?
A lot of advances. Computer and the internet is huge. We can speak to one another through video phone rather than typing on a teletypewriter. We can send video messages to people. We can put up on YouTube People can share signs, regional signs that they've never seen before. You can find signs from other countries, other places. You can look at dictionaries. And I'm able to not just stare at a book that has 2D photographs on it. I can learn things through the internet. I used interpreters through the phone, through TTY. It was a communication assistant. And we would type words, and I would send it to a communication assistant or interpreter. And there would be a lot of misunderstanding because there's no tone, no facial grammar, no flavor to any of the conversation. No mannerisms are put in words. And now I can see an interpreter through a screen like we're doing right now with Mala, and I can see a person communicating through sign language, and that's a huge change for deaf people. And of course, a lot more things have happened, like we have better sound identification. If you hear a phone ringing, you'll have a light flash. Or if you hear a dog barking or a baby crying, recognizing sounds will be different signals relayed through light rather than through sound.
Mm-hmm. I knew a friend of mine in my teenage years who could enjoy music by getting close to the speaker and feeling the vibrations and could keep a beat. I mean, it was quite remarkable what he could do.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now tell us about signing. What is the history of signing?
Very long history. American Sign Language that we're using right now, about 250 years old. In France, there were people using it, and in Martha's Vineyard and a couple other places. There was an island in Martha's Vineyard. They had many members of the island who learned sign language. It's kind of a long story in the background, but on that island, on Martha's Vineyard, they had a lot of people who were signing, and they have documentation back to Spain, kings, friends of theirs, and they had some, interpreters, but it wasn't the same, in about 1500 or 1600, many years ago. And I think University of Arizona did some research and found many old pictures, paintings of hands, and very hard to draw, but they recognized that they had some complex hand shapes in pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to notate what they had seen. And so University of Chicago, they think that sign language is as old as spoken language, that they're finding some remnants of that.
Very interesting.
And just to add to that, sign language not only benefits deaf people, it benefits all people. Obviously, people with hands. But it's a huge benefit because now baby talk is very popular, and we realize that kids gesture and mimic hand signals easier than they do, and they play back, if you will, or mimic back earlier than trying to mimic speech. So parents are excited to teach children or babies sign so that they can communicate with them earlier. And so it's not only that deaf people use sign language, but it applies to a wide variety of people and applicable to many others.
That's very interesting, and it makes a lot of common sense because a baby, before it can speak, will recognize sign language, recognize gesture, and associate that with something else. Yeah.
And the same with English. You can't just limit it to terminology. It's too limited. You would perhaps lose the use of it. You need to add different words, different languages, like croissant, bologna, things that we've added or borrowed from other languages, not just limiting our use of English to English terms. I can't think of a good example, but there's a lot of phrases or terms that we've borrowed from other languages. Same goes with sign language, that we have added flavor, if you will, to a variety of other languages into American Sign Language.
Now, is there an organization that keeps track of American Sign Language and amends it and changes it as time goes on?
Before National Association of the Deaf, NAD, their purpose of establishing themselves was to preserve sign language, but now the mission has changed and it's more broad for deaf rights, international recognition, supporting laws, lobbying, but when they were first set up, it was to preserve the language. And they have more universities who are involved with the research, and many new books have been published. Many journals have been published with research recognizing the benefits of sign language and preserving it. Specifically, they don't have anyone who there's no Webster dictionary, if you will. It would be nice, and you'll probably see it happen in our lifetime as they document more signs.
It just makes sense that it's part of the function of the organization, but like everything else, everything depends on money and funds available. Now obviously, we talked a little bit about American Sign Language, but my impression is not every word gets interpreted literally. The signer has to paraphrase, for lack of a better term, to the deaf person to get the message.
ASL is a different language, different grammar, different structure, different vocabulary. Linguistic term, different parameters, if you will. And English and Spanish, well, I can't think of a perfect example, but from what I understand, an exact translation of leftovers in English, if you translate that to Spanish, is yesterday's clothes. Don't quote me, but I think it's something like that. And in Spanish, there's no word for commander. And the closest translation if you were to translate the English term commander into Spanish, it would be a military leader. So there's no one-to-one correlation for French to English, Spanish to English. You have a concept that is and can move between languages, but a one-to-one correlation does not exist always.
Interesting, very interesting. So tell us about Johnny. Are you married?
Yes, I am married to a wonderful woman. I just had a baby 6 months ago.
Ah, congratulations. Wonderful.
Thank you. I'm six. I have a wonderful shoe size of 13. I live in San Diego, obviously. Well, actually, I'm from LA. And a bonus is that I'm on the show, so I'm in San Diego.
Thank you for that. We noticed you were tall.
Yes.
Now, your wife, she hears and speaks?
It's a little complex. She lost her hearing. She is a late deafened adult. But now she is, we term something called deafhood, meaning that the experience of transitioning into the deaf world or the deaf community, we call it deafhood. It's a new deafhood.
Deafhood.
And so she lost her hearing and is teaching hearing people now. Her family doesn't sign. They're all hearing. She uses the phone, and more she's learning the journey into the deaf world now and more deaf culture. So technically she lost her hearing. She just learned sign, not just, but 10 years ago. And it's kind of an odd term, but yes, she's a new member, if you will, to the deaf community.
And she has you to show her the way.
Yeah, me and many of our friends.
Good. And your child, she's healthy as far as deaf? She hears?
She's healthy, 10 toes, 10 fingers, and I think she hears, but I'm not sure. Yeah, no, she
But she cries. You know she cries.
Yes. You don't have to be hearing to know that she's crying. You can see that.
Absolutely. And I presume you have a job, you're employed?
Well, actually, no, we decided that I would be a stay-home dad.
Uh-huh.
Better job in the world. It's the best job. Best job in the world.
Good for you. That's great. So, all right, then tell us about a typical day for Johnny.
My day is very boring and yet normal. I get up with the help of the vibration bed alarm. I have an alarm that is plugged in under my pillow. And when it's time to wake up, I wake up. I make coffee for my wife and I. I pack my baby's diapers and the bag and things to part the day, and then I check my email, check the news, do the same thing I do every day, try to take over the world, but a typical day.
Key question. Do you do windows?
I could if I wanted to, but really I don't. I think my neighbor, the teenage boy, it's his job.
Good for you. So, tell us, in today's world, what are still some of the obstacles and challenges for deaf adults? And then I'll follow that up with deaf children. What difficulties and challenges do we have to deal with today in both categories?
It's a big question because there's different levels or layers. I could summarize two-part answer. Societal attitudes towards sign language and deaf people would be one. Thinking that deaf people are handicapped, special needs, broken, that attitude needs to change because we've proven that that's not true. We're just different. And sign language, a long history of people saying that sign language isn't good. You shouldn't teach the children sign language because then they'll lose their ability to speak. And they can read, English, and people feel that if they can't read and write English, then, it's a noble gift, I should say, that not only deaf, but that all hearing kids should be able to read and write, and they can do that with sign language. And so it's really about the attitude, to change the attitude, because that in turn will influence the schools and the society that we feel we are fractured with. When people look at attitudinal perceptions of sign language, of people not working, or just looking at how to hire people. When they're deaf, they often feel that it's not a good idea because of limitations. And then there's the technical challenges. Like left-handed people get hurt by using right-handed people's tools. And that's a technical problem. But hearing people need to include deaf people a little bit more. For cars nowadays, for example, on the OnStar system is voice activated, and that doesn't work for deaf people. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's easy to fix.
All you need to do is get people interested.
Yeah, and change their attitude.
Well, I had a question for you later on that touches on that, and I'll talk about that a little later.
Okay.
Now, every day we hear more and more about technical breakthroughs and medical breakthroughs as far as all types of things we deal with. What about the deaf world? What's new and up and coming, as far as you know, as far as medical or technical breakthroughs?
Related to fixing pathological deafness?
Any aspect of dealing with deafness.
Okay. Well, like I had mentioned before, there's a medical community and the deaf community, or the culturally identified deaf. The medical camp says that there are improvements, genetic mapping of deaf people. Controversial because genetic anything is a controversial discussion. Cochlear implants is a discussion that the medical community has, trying to have better hearing aids, helping solve the medical issues that they see, looking for a cure for deaf people. But culturally deaf people do not look at deafness as something that needs to be healed or cured. It's a very different set. So for me, if I wanted to accept the medical advances to becoming hearing, I wouldn't be interested in being different. Would you want to be Bob for one day?
No.
I doubt it.
No.
So it doesn't make sense that we would want to be something different. But there is a lot of technological advances in the field. And there's some progress, and some people do benefit. My grandmother has bad hearing, and she's 80, and she could use the assistance for the rest of her life to hear better by using a hearing aid. It doesn't mean that it'll help improve and cure it, but it will help.
All right, we're running a little short on time, so I just want to get back to signing. And if someone in our audience were interested in learning how to sign, what would you recommend they do?
In San Diego,
San Diego, of course.
community colleges are great. Mesa College and Palomar are very good programs. UCSD has a program as well. And you could just start looking at websites. There's a lot of information available. Support and resources, centers to give more support and resources are available. But the best thing that you can do is find a deaf friend and talk with them.
Very good point. Very good point. So we only have a minute or two left. What makes you laugh? What makes you happy?
My daughter is my whole world. So every morning I need to wake her up and she gives this cute little hello world look, and that's just precious, and that makes me laugh.
Wonderful, wonderful. Anything you'd like to recommend, Marla, as far as people wanting to get involved in signing?
Oh, what he said.
There's a perception, if there was one perception that you would want changed, that the general public has, and you could change it, which one would it be?
Well, we look for diversity. We encourage the biological environment would die if you had no diversity. The ecosystem would cease to exist if you had no diversity. So racism, sexism, ageism, respecting and accepting others who are different. That's a big problem with the deaf community.
I think that covers a lot of us. We're running short of time. I must say how much, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you being here and the education you've given us. You've opened a whole new world to us that we weren't aware of. And to take time out of what's obviously a very busy day for both of you, and to come here and enlighten us and entertain us, because you're a very entertaining person, both of you are. So I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
You're quite welcome.